don't always have to make noise to make progress. Sometimes the most powerful moves are made in silence, in secret, in the dark places where no one is watching. That's where God does his most intimate work. In the womb of preparation, in the quiet corner of your discipline, in the hidden space where he shapes your character before he reveals your calling. We live in a world that demands you prove yourself before you even understand yourself. But God is not rushing you into performance. He is rooting you in purpose. And purpose isn't loud. Purpose doesn't need applause. Purpose is steady. It's sacred. It's strategic. This message is for the woman or man who feels overlooked, for the person grinding in the background, wondering if anyone sees them, wondering if they're doing enough, wondering when it'll be their turn. God wants you to know your quiet season is not a wasted season.
There comes a point in your life where exhaustion no longer feels like tiredness. It feels like silence. You stop praying the same prayers with desperation. You stop begging for clarity in places God has already spoken. You stop waiting on phone calls that never come, responses that never match your energy, and outcomes that never line up with the promise. It's not bitterness, it's surrender. It's not anger. And in this sacred shift, from striving to resting, from pleading to trusting, something holy begins to unfold. You begin to realize that sometimes the presence of delay is not the absence of God, but the orchestration of a greater pursuit. We've been taught that caring deeply is spiritual, that to let go means we've lost faith. But what if true faith is expressed most clearly in the moment we release control? What if heaven only moves when earth runs out of options? There is a divine exchange that takes place when you stop holding on to what is falling apart and start holding fast to the one who never lets go. You stop caring about forcing the outcome. And that is when he begins to chase after you with clarity, confirmation, and provision. It's in that shift when you finally say, God, have your way, that his way begins to interrupt your reality. Today, I want to speak to the ones who are tired, the ones who have loved deeply, tried faithfully, waited prayerfully, and still found themselves stuck in the cycle of almost. I want to declare over your life that this is not the end. This is the pivot. When you stop caring in your flesh, heaven starts moving in your spirit. When you stop chasing after things God never asked you to pursue, you make room for what he has always had prepared. Your surrender is God's signal to start. It's in that sacred moment when you drop the weight of trying to make it all work that heaven begins to orchestrate the very things you used to pray for. We think surrender is a sign of weakness, when in fact, it's the highest form of strength in the kingdom. The world teaches you to fight harder, grind more, push through, but the kingdom often moves in reverse. In God's economy, less is more. Stillness is strategy. And surrender is power. When you let go of what you were never meant to carry, you signal to God that you're ready for what he's always intended. Many of us confuse surrender with quitting. But quitting is walking away in hopelessness. While surrender is stepping aside in faith, is saying, God, I've done all I know to do. And now I trust you to do what only you can. This is not a sign that you've lost. This is a sign that you've matured. Because maturity in the spirit knows when to speak and when to be silent, when to war and when to wait, when to run and when to rest. Look at Abraham, who had to surrender Isaac. The very promise God gave him, it wasn't that God wanted Isaac to death. He wanted Abraham's surrender. There are things in your life that God may allow you to bring to the altar, not because he wants to take them from you, but because he wants to see if you trust him more than the thing. And once he sees your heart, he provides a ram in the thicket. But the provision did show up until Abraham let go. The moment you surrender the outcome, you create space for God's provision to enter. Sometimes God won't start chasing you with his best until you stop chasing after what you think is good. You've been working, performing, pleasing, overthinking, all trying to create a life God never asked you to build. And all he's been waiting for is for you to say, I'm done. Not done with life, not done with faith, but done trying to make it happen in your own strength. Because the moment you step back, he steps forward. The moment you put your plans down, he lifts his up. The moment you stop orchestrating, he starts ordering your steps. It's not that God hasn't been speaking. It's that you've been too busy fixing to hear him. It's in surrender that your spirit becomes quiet enough to perceive the whisper. And it's often just a whisper that shifts everything. Because when you surrender, you don't need to hear paragraphs. You only need a word. One word from God can break years of delay. One yes from him can blow fresh life into that situation. Surrender changes the posture of your heart. It turns your focus from trying to trusting, from anxiety to alignment. You're no longer working for approval or for outcomes. You begin to rest, knowing that if he started it, he's faithful to finish it. And while you rest, he moves. While you stop caring in your flesh, he starts chasing in the spirit. Your surrender is the sound of a door unlocking in the unseen realm. You may not see it yet, but heaven has already responded. The moment you let go of what you thought should happen, angels are released to prepare what God always planned. The earth may look quiet, but the heavens are busy. It's not inactivity, it's incubation. Surrender doesn't mean stagnation. It means movement behind the veil. It means God is doing what you can't do in a way you can't see, with results you couldn't imagine. You keep asking God to pour into you, to give you more clarity, more peace, more breakthrough, more direction. But your hands are full. Your heart is full of your own plans, full of distractions, full of people God never sent and ideas he never endorsed. And the truth is, heaven doesn't waste oil. God doesn't pour into what's already overflowing with self-will, fear, pride, or unresolved emotion. You've got to make room. You've got to empty yourself of everything that competes with his voice. He cannot fill what you insist on keeping full. Imagine a vessel asking to be filled, but it's already packed with dirt, debris, and yesterday's leftovers. The request to be filled is valid, but the condition of the container makes it impossible. You've been asking for fresh revelation while still meditating on old offenses, longing for a new chapter, but you're still holding on to bookmarks from stories that no longer serve you. Your spirit is willing, but your soul is hoarding. And until you release what was, you'll never receive what is. God is not withholding, He's waiting. Waiting for you to pour out the things you were never meant to carry, the approval you crave, the titles you cling to, the timelines you created, the silent vows you made in broken places. Some of what you call identity is just old survival tactics, and you're asking God to bless a version of you He never authored. And He won't pour His oil on who you pretended to be just to feel safe. He wants the real you, the empty you, the ready you, the surrendered you. You can't be full of faith and full of fear at the same time. You can't be full of trust and still be rehearsing every worst case scenario. You can't be full of divine purpose and still be living for applause. It's not that God doesn't want to fill you. It's that what He wants to give you, your current container can hold. He's calling you to capacity. But capacity doesn't come from hustle. It comes from holiness. Holiness creates space. It clears the clutter of culture, people-pleasing, and ego, so that something eternal can rest within you. Consider the widow in 2 Kings 4. The one Elisha told to gather vessels for oil. The miracle was not in the oil itself. It was in the availability of the empty jars. As long as there were vessels, the oil kept flowing. The flow stopped when the capacity ended. Your miracle is not limited by God's supply, but by your space to receive. What would happen if you finally let go of what's not working? What would shift if you finally forgave? What doors would open if you laid down your agenda and asked God for His? This is why fasting is powerful. Not because it earns us points with God, but because it empties us of distractions. It silences the noise. It loosens our grip on things that have taken up too much space in our spirit. It is a divine detox. A way of saying, Lord, I make room. Every act of obedience that empties your soul of pride, control, or performance is an invitation for God to pour in more of Himself. And let's be honest, some of us stay full because it gives us a sense of control. We fill our schedule so we don't have to feel. We fill our hearts with people so we don't have to sit in silence. We fill our minds with worry because anxiety feels like productivity. But all of it is noise. All of it is clutter. And God is not obligated to compete with what you prioritize. He's a filler, not a force. He'll wait until you're ready to let go. So if you're feeling dry, it may not be because God hasn't spoken. It may be that He's been waiting for you to make space. Pour out the need to be understood. Empty yourself of every idol disguised as a safety net. Surrender the timelines, the pressure, the backup plans. Let God be God, and He will fill you in ways you never imagined. But first, you must become empty enough to hold the weight of what He wants to pour. There is a kind of chasing that exhausts the soul, the kind where you are constantly trying to fix, to prove, to earn, to control. It's the striving that says, if I just do more, maybe it will finally happen. You fast until your body is worn out, but your mind is still full of anxiety. You serve until your cup is dry, but you never feel seen. You stay in situations where God has already said, let go. because you're afraid of being misunderstood. And somewhere in that loop, faith begins to look like performance, and obedience starts to feel like manipulation. That is not the life God intended for you. Divine pursuit begins. God doesn't need your hustle. He wants your heart. He's not asking you to wear yourself out trying to force outcomes He never authored. The lie of religion is that we must work our way into blessings. The truth of the gospel is that grace meets us in surrender. You don't earn the pursuit of God. It finds you when you stop trying to orchestrate the divine with human strength. When you finally drop the weight of trying to hold your world together, you realize He already has it in His hands. Self-effort is not the same as diligence. Diligence honors God, but self-effort tries to replace Him. It's the belief that everything depends on you. That if you stop moving, everything will fall apart. That mindset is not faith, it's fear in disguise. And fear cannot coexist with divine pursuit, because God will not chase you while you are still busy chasing everything else. His love waits not because it is passive, but because it is patient. He knows the moment your strength runs out is the moment His power takes over. There is a beauty in the breaking. When your plans collapse and your formulas fail, it can feel like failure, but it's often divine intervention. Some of the greatest moves of God begin with the shutting down of your own. He is not punishing you when He lets your efforts fall short. He is preparing you. You were never meant to carry the pressure of outcomes. God never asked you to figure everything out. He asked you to follow, to trust, to obey when it doesn't make sense, to rest even when it feels risky. That is the death of self-effort. That is where divine pursuit begins. Look at Peter, who toiled all night trying to catch fish and caught nothing. It wasn't until he obeyed the word of Jesus and cast his net on the other side that the miracle happened. All night he tried in his own strength. But when he stopped relying on experience and trusted divine instruction, overflow came. That's what happens when you lay down your methods and pick up His voice. It may not make sense. It may not look strategic. But the net we can catch is on the other side of surrender. This is what happens when you stop pushing and start listening. When you stop proving and start abiding. When you stop treating obedience like a transaction and start seeing it as an invitation. Because that's what divine pursuit really is. God inviting you into a life that is beyond your ability to manufacture. A life that unfolds as you let go. A rhythm that flows not from your grind, but from His grace. There are things you've been praying for that will only come when your self-effort finally dies. Not because God is cruel, but because He loves you too much to let you think you earned it. He wants you to know that it was Him, that the door opened because He opened it. That the opportunity landed, not because you networked right, but because heaven's calendar said it was time. And when it happens, you know the difference. Because you won't feel exhausted, you'll feel carried. You won't be drained, you'll be filled. You won't be questioning your worth. You'll be overwhelmed by His goodness. That's what it feels like when God starts chasing you. When heaven moves toward you, not because you made it happen, but because you finally let go of needing to. Divine pursuit begins not with more striving, but with less of you trying to be the savior of your own story. There's a spiritual law that few talk about, but heaven responds to it every time. Release precedes response. You want answers, but God is asking for release. You want doors to open, but God is saying, let go of the handle you're holding on to. We pray for divine outcomes, but still grip tightly to our own strategies. We cry out for breakthrough while refusing to release the things we secretly idolize. But God doesn't respond to tight fists. He responds to open hands. He responds when you say, Lord, even if I don't get it back, even if I don't see how, I release it because I trust you more than I trust me. Release is not just about letting go of sin. It's also about letting go of control. It's about releasing timelines, relationships, plans, fears, and even dreams that have become entangled with your identity. Some of the most spiritual things you can do have nothing to do with church attendance and everything to do with surrendering what you're holding too tightly. When you release, you make space in your schedule, space in your emotions, space in your spirit. And heaven never ignores space that's been made by faith. Remember the boy with the 2 fish and 5 loaves? Jesus didn't multiply what the boy withheld. He multiplied what was released. The miracle didn't happen in the holding, it happened in the handing over. Some of you are holding things you think are too small to matter. But if you'd release them, God would breathe on them. He'd stretch them. He'd multiply them. You're asking for increase while still clutching scarcity. You want overflow while still operating in fear of lack. But God responds to faith, and faith always releases first. There is a divine order in the spirit. First the release, then the response. First Abraham lays Isaac on the altar, then the ram appears. First Moses stretches his hand over the sea, then the waters part. First the woman with the issue of blood touches his garment, then the healing flows. God is always watching to see what you're willing to place on the altar. Not because he needs your offering, but because he wants your trust. And trust is proven in what you're willing to give up before you see the result. Sometimes we delay our own answer because we're trying to negotiate obedience. We say, God, show me what you're going to do, and then I'll release this. But God says, release it and I'll show you what I'm going to do. That's where faith becomes active. Not in declarations alone, but in decisions. Not in emotion, but in obedience. When you release the relationship that's draining you, even though your heart still aches. When you release the opportunity that looked good but didn't sit right in your spirit. When you release the bitterness you've been justified in holding. That is when the heavens take notice. That is when things begin to move. And here's what's beautiful about release. It's not about loss. It's about alignment. When you release what was never yours to keep, you'll make room for what's been assigned. Some of the things you're grieving were never meant to go the distance. But as long as your hands are full of what was, you won't be able to catch what's coming. God is a responder.